Do you think that they would just level Gaza, even if that meant killing the Israelis?
Well, so here's what I think. Okay, and I'm not one to predict because we don't know where this is going to go. First of all, and I think Miko was talking, I caught the tail end of it. Is Israelis, in terms of ground invasion, it hasn't gone well for them recently,
Right.
historically. And it's actually not their experience with Palestinians that have given them that. It's their experience with the Lebanese resistance. Right. Okay. When they barely could advance 3 kilometers into Lebanon in 2006, they had this. I encourage everyone to read this, and I encourage you, Katie, to read it. There's an article, an assessment actually made by a pro-Israeli military official in the U.S. It's called "We Were Caught Unprepared," okay, which does an actual assessment of IDF's capabilities and their strategies in 2006 war in Lebanon. Okay, basically the assessment is they're used to dealing with militias. Okay, and by militias, there's a difference between trained fighters and militias. Militias is like you see a couple guys on the street, they need to defend that area, you give them some guns. Those are militias. They don't have any formal training. They don't have any structure, like actual military structure. They don't have any discipline. They don't know how they don't have any communications apparatuses. They're just guys with guns. Okay, they're used to dealing with guys with guns. That's what the Israelis are used to dealing with. In the West Bank, when they go into Jenin, now obviously this is advanced. The resistance in the West Bank is advanced, but historically they just go in, they do what they want, they leave unscathed, or maybe one of them gets shot. You know, Gaza is not like that anymore for them. Gaza has a city underneath the city. They have a tunnel network. Okay, they've assassinated 2 figures of Hamas in this last 3 days. Of all this bombardment, of the thousands of missiles they've launched, 2 Hamas leaders have been assassinated. Okay, what that tells you is they're not going to be able to decapitate the head of Hamas from the skies. So they have to go into the ground. And when they go into the ground, a society that is very sensitive to the loss of soldier life is not going to be able to withstand a face-to-face combat. Because what's going to happen is, first of all, it's booby-trapped. Hamas initiated this war, not Israel. So they've prepared for an invasion. So that means then there's a trap set. And right now, this is why there's a delay. In 2006, they invaded immediately, and they suffered losses immediately. They haven't. It's been 3 days they haven't invaded. They're like still gathering up troops, which is shocking. And before, this would have never happened. Before, it would have just been bombardment from the skies. But right now, the bombardment it's diminishing returns. Over time, you can only drop so many rockets and kill so many civilians before you haven't accomplished your political goal, or the goal of the war, which is what they've stated, to eliminate Hamas. So they have to go into the ground. That's not going to be a fun battle. That's not going to be a fun fight for them. They're going to lose a lot of soldiers, and it's going to be slow moving, and it's a territory that's not their territory, a territory controlled by the other side that knows the intricacies of the neighborhoods, the underground tunnels, knows where the traps are, and has set up a system that would allow them to repel people. So I think it's going to be, if they invade, it's going to be long drawn out. And here's the problem for them. If they invade, they still have the resistance in Lebanon to contend with. And that's the worst case scenario for them, is the Lebanese resistance to come into this picture. Because the Lebanese resistance's capabilities, its number of soldiers, its rockets, is multitude more advanced than what exists in Gaza. And that's the worst case scenario for Israel. And that's why the U.S. docked a warship outside of Lebanon in the Mediterranean, because they want to try to deter them. But we've seen back and forth with Israel and Lebanon recently in the last few days, and this is just testing the water, right? Like, this is just about, but it's Hezbollah telling the Israelis, we're here and present, so be careful how you do it. And I don't think the resistance in Lebanon will let Hamas be destroyed. I don't think they will without entering. And they've signaled that they won't let them. So this is where we're ending up. The only way out of this, in my opinion, is a negotiation. Now, if the Israeli society is willing, after what's happened, to do that, it will get it done. But that's my fear, that Netanyahu, if he off-ramps to a negotiation, that means his government's done. His coalition is done. And he's in prison. That's what's at risk here. That's what's at stake here. And that's why it's really dangerous a moment. And then, the potential for a regional war with Iran and the Iraqi militias and all of this other stuff. I won't even get into that, but that's also a possible reality for us.
Well, Brad, the producer of the show, wanted to know if he thought if Israel chose to level Gaza, thereby knowingly killing many Israeli citizens with Israeli bombs, whether you think that would happen. If it did, what the consequences would be.
It's hard to say right now. Like, they've signaled that they don't care about the lives of the prisoners of war
Right, which is crazy because they love to pretend that that's all they care about, right? They never leave anyone behind, even corpses.
Right. And so I think that's bluffing. Like, I do think that I don't think Israeli society can forgive a Netanyahu-led government for killing captives, right? Because here's the thing, even with Gilad Shalit, like this one prisoner, his family was able to create so much pressure on the Israeli government, right? And this is true of the other, because before this war broke out, Hamas has a few prisoners, has 3 or 4 of Israeli soldiers. And there was one that wandered into Gaza, I believe an Israeli man, but I don't remember the specifics of it. I don't know that they would level Gaza at the expense of these people. So I think there's a diminishing return. They've been telling us they're going to invade any moment now for the last 48 hours. I do expect them to. I actually don't want to say that I expect them to invade. I don't know what to expect right now. I think right now they're just generating consent, and I think the world, the international community will turn really quickly back on Israel. Not because I think they care about Palestinians, but they can't have an outbreak of a regional war with Ukraine and Russia. Like, the U.S. is kind of stuck right now, and then you have the pivot to Taiwan and China, like all of these things, and this might give you a sense of why Hamas decided to do what it did in this moment, right? If you pay attention to what's been happening the last 3 years with the West Bank, with the South, with the establishment of tents in the Sheba farms by the resistance in Lebanon, right? If you follow these things, these are all a negotiation around the gas fields in the Mediterranean between Lebanon and Israel, in which Hezbollah threatened to attack the gas fields, the actual extractors of the explorers and extractors of gas off the coast of Palestine. That all couldn't and wouldn't exist if there wasn't a war in Russia and Ukraine. Why? Because first of all, Israel needs to extract that gas for European consumption, right? There's a pressure around that. The second is, right now the U.S. has funneled all of its weapons, all of its money into supplying this war, a non-ending war. So right now, they're going to be forced to pick. Do we back an extended long-term war that might become a regional war in the Middle East, or do we still focus on Russia and Ukraine? And wait a minute, we still got Taiwan and China. This multipolarity that exists, that's opening up, is creating more limited choices for Western powers. And that includes Israel, because ultimately Israel is an outpost for the West.